had occasion, I sat in the audience for a few minutes while some of you are displaying their dramatic talent in the theatrical arts. I think we have actors here and actresses. And maybe we should all get in touch with Lupita and tell her that she needs to come auditioning and scouting for talent in this establishment. Given the short time that you've had, I was pleasantly surprised. I spent very many years on the stage, so I was pleasantly surprised to see some of you have even begun to sort of ad-lib the words. You don't need to look at your script anymore. I think that is really positive. And I would encourage you to continue to do this, to continue to invest time in the enactment. I guess I can start. The link. Okay, I see. This is not really a play in the traditional sense. It is a reenactment of the 5th Pan-African Congress that took place in the city of Manchester in 1945. Is a link up, Mwalimu? Yes. Okay, it's a reenactment. It's basically a compression. What the writer has done, Bani Afako, what Bani Afako has done is to compress the proceedings of the conference that took place in Manchester, of the Pan-African Congress that took place in Manchester in 1945, October 1945. The stage instructions say that at the beginning of this reenactment, there are 3 flags on the wall. The 3 flags, there are 2 here. There are 3 flags. The 3 flags are supposed to be the flag of Liberia, the flag of Ethiopia, and the flag of Haiti. There is some context for this, and I am sure some of you have Googled it. But for those who haven't Googled, these 3 countries were the only black ran republics in 1945. Each of them represents, in some way, some interesting dimension of African freedom. So it is important to understand this. Let's begin with Liberia. Liberia owes Liberia as a republic, and the name Liberia. Liberia is from the Latin word liber, which means free. Was founded by a group from America called the American Colonization Society. The American Colonization Society was looking for a place where free slaves could emigrate to. The interesting thing is that, in fact, the act of founding Liberia is, in some senses, an act of colonialism. It's an act of colonization. Because what they did is exactly what people like Karl Peters had done in German East Africa, which is to come around and sign agreements with local community leaders and say these are treaties. And this is exactly the same thing that the American Colonization Society did in Liberia, to be given permission to bring the freed slaves from the US to that country. It's got some interesting paradoxes to it, because first, the group that founded it is called the American Colonization Society. Number 2, the slaveholders actually supported it. The slaveholders were very enthusiastic about it. Why would the slaveholders be enthusiastic? Because they thought that to have free slaves in the US would be a problem for the ones that are not slave-free. It would be act as a provocation. So they did not want them to be free and to be in the US. So you had a paradox where you had free slaves wanting to leave, slaveholders wanting them to leave, and a society called the American Colonization Society supporting their leaving. And in some ways, the conversations that took place in America are very similar to the conversations that have taken place about Palestine. Because in the problem of Palestine has got a dimension that says the only solution you have in Israel is a 2-state solution. separate the races, the groups. It's the same argument going on here. If Africans are free, take them to Africa, back to Africa. But there were also Africans activists in the US who refused, who are unhappy with the idea of removing freed slaves from America, because in their view, the freed slaves were actually Americans, who are unhappy that they were being removed to be taken to Liberia. Now, the long-term consequence was that these freed slaves who came back to Liberia formed an elite that governed Liberia from 1847 after independence all the way to the 1980s. And by the way, this relationship between the indigenous people and the freed slaves who had come from America eventually led to civil war in Liberia. So I want you to keep this in mind as you do this play. Then Ethiopia. Ethiopia was not colonized in the formal sense. It was occupied by Italy, and I think you'll see in the play for 6.5, 7 years, it was occupied by Italy. The Italians were eventually defeated. And the Italians, for your information, had already been defeated by the Ethiopians in 1896 at a famous battle. I think it's called the Battle of Adwa. They had been defeated by the Ethiopians earlier. So Ethiopia had if you were to look for a quintessentially free African state, then it would be Ethiopia. Haiti is extremely interesting because Haiti represents the first state, or the first republic founded by a slave revolt. The slave leader was a guy called 𝐏𝐶-𝐞𝐧𝐿. There's a very beautiful book on this, written in a very racy fashion, called This Gilded African, which I would recommend very, very strongly that you read. Now, the interesting thing about Haiti, and I'll come back to this in a minute, the interesting thing about Haiti is that the reason why the blacks in Haiti, the slaves, revolted was because of the example of the American War of Revolution in 1776 and the French Revolution in 1789. Remember that the American Declaration of Independence said this, said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men are created equal. Yeah? So the blacks in Haiti take this to heart. And then in 1789, the French declare in the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen that equality is a fundamental feature of humanity. So they take this to heart, and they conduct a revolution. And the interesting thing is the response of the European powers. The response of the European powers, including Napoleon, the face of the revolution. The response of the Europeans is to support a very severe, one of the harshest crackdown on a war of independence, on a revolution for independence ever conducted. And ironically, in 1802, Napoleon had actually sent an army to Haiti, not only to crush the rebellion, but also put them back in slavery. So these are the same French who have said that liberté, égalité, fraternité. Yeah, they are the same guys who are now sending an army to go and crush. So I want you to keep these ideas at the back of your mind as you go through this play, because this is a thread running through the play. It is not verbalized in the reenactment, but it is important that you keep it in mind. This is what is going on in the flagging, in the Haiti flag, the Ethiopian flag, and the Liberian flag. Okay, what I want to do is something really simple. What I want to do is to give you, in very thumbnail fashion, what I see to be the key things in this reenactment. First, I want to begin with a summary of the core message. The core message for me is summarized by Dr. W.E. Du Bois, and it is in the quote, and I put the quote out here, the quote that the struggles for human dignity are universal. The struggles for human dignity are universal. So you can see that tying back to the Haitians who have believed that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, I want you to remember that in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson also says that governments are created to protect those liberties. And that whenever government becomes destructive of those ends, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the business of the people to overthrow them or to alter them. Okay? So the Haitian people had taken that to heart completely. And this is the message that Du Bois is confirming in this quote where he says, the struggles for human dignity are universal. The second point I want us to look at is what are the stakes? What are the stakes for black people? The stakes for black people are actually expressed by Mr. Samuel Adams from Granada, who says the following. He says that black people have been bled dry by imperialism. So the message is the struggles for human dignity are universal. The stakes involved are we, black people, have been bled dry by imperialism. So the response we are having in this conference, in this Congress, is a response to the fact that we gesture to the universality of dignity, but we recognize that our realities are realities of being bled dry by imperialism. And then there is a commitment, also again expressed by one of the characters. There is a commitment that the Africans and people of African descent are on the march. We will not halt until we reach our goal. Dignity, universal, stakes, being bled dry by imperialism, when we can't stop until we reach our goal. But then there is also some reality checks. There are two reality checks that are very important as you read this enactment. The first reality check is a gender reality check. The journey of freedom has begun, according to the Congress, but it is incomplete. And I think we have this sense when we read the statement by 𝐼𝐸 Garvey. 𝐼𝐸 Garvey was the ex-wife of Marcus Garvey, who you may know a little bit about. They were both very accomplished Pan-Africanists. So, I mean, it is not one of those situations where we say this is so-and-so's wife, or this is so-and-so's husband. So, 𝐼𝐸 Garvey says, a lot has been written and spoken of the black man, but for some reason, very little has been said about the black woman. She has simply been shunted into the background, an invisible childbearer doing all the difficult work. And in this conference, which has more than 200 people from 20 nations, there are only 2 women. So clearly, she has a point, and it's an important point that, so she's saying, there is a reality check here. Yes, we are fighting for human dignity, yet we have been bled dry by imperialism, but even amongst ourselves, we are also having an issue that we need to deal with, okay? And the second reality check is a reminder by Du Bois himself that independence won't solve all our problems, and we shall sometimes fail. If you go back to the enactment, this is what Du Bois says. He makes 3 things. He makes 3 points. Point number 1, we can govern ourselves even if not always well. He says, we all want to believe that we can govern ourselves now and that we can govern ourselves well. But that may not necessarily be true. Government, after all, is a matter of experience, long experience. So he's telling them, don't get carried away. Yes, independence is important, but even if we get it, there is no assurance that we will govern ourselves well. Okay? But that doesn't mean that we should give up. Because his second point is that making mistakes is human and natural. And he says, any person who have been deprived of self-government for a long time and then have it returned to them are liable to make mistakes. This is only human and natural. So the fact that he says that we may not govern ourselves well is not a reason for us to say that we do not want this independence. He's saying because making mistakes is part of our natural condition, and that so long as you've been deprived of liberty for a very long time, when you get the liberty back, chances are that you will make mistakes. Finally, he says, which I think is a very important point, that making mistakes in self-government is both a right that we have, and it is a learning point. And how does he frame it? He frames it this way. We have the right to make our own mistakes. He is owning the mistake. He says, we have the right to make our own mistakes. Is that not how people learn? We must therefore have self-government, even if we will make mistakes. So in terms of summary of high messages from this enactment, those are the 6 that I would like to put out. But there are also 5 key messages from the resolutions. Remember, at the end of this Congress, some resolutions were passed. And I would like to take you through some of what I see to be the 5 messages coming from those resolutions. So this is what I think they are. These 5 messages are that African people, 1, believe and are committed to peace, in contrast to a Western world that seems determined to rule humanity by colonial force. The point is that the experience that African people have up to this point is an experience in which they have been governed by force. And the Congress is contrasting itself to the colonial power by saying the African people are themselves committed to peace and do not want to be governed by force. Number 2, African people are determined to be free. But African people also define freedom in terms of human capabilities. In the resolutions, they talk about the right to education, the right to earn a decent living, but they also include political freedoms. But I think this is a really important point, because one of the experiences, those of us who have trained in the West, one of the experiences we faced is that it's very difficult when you have a conversation on rights with Westerners for them to appreciate this idea of right to education, right to health being rights. They see those as things that you achieve through the market. You know, those are things that you get through the market. But this is what the African people are saying in Manchester, that they are determined to be free, but they are defining freedom to include the right to education and the right to a decent living, which means getting fair wages and having a floor to protect you. They are also demanding autonomy. The African people are also demanding for autonomy and independence and self-governance. But I want you to notice that the first things they started with was not autonomy and independence and self-governance. That they started with peace, and they went to values, rights. And I want you also to notice that this enactment is not called determined to be independent. It is called determined to be free. So I think it is important you keep that in mind. Number 4, Africans take the long view, and they are not ashamed to be a patient people. If you think about what is being said in this reenactment, there's a long history. There is a reference to slavery. There's a reference to many years of colonialism. So the overall conclusion is that African people are patient people, and they are not ashamed to be patient. Yeah? But they are also saying they accept sacrifice and struggle, but they will no longer be beasts of burden, supporting a false aristocracy and a discredited imperialism. So the patience, do not misunderstand the patience, so that then you think we've become beasts of burden to commit to your drudgery of sustaining this aristocracy and this discredited imperialism. Then finally, the last message that comes from the resolutions is they reject the monopoly of capital and rule by private wealth and for private profit alone. They are committed to economic democracy as the only real democracy. This is a huge subject, and we could talk about it till tomorrow morning, because the Westerners, if you think about the justifications for slavery, the justifications for indentured labor, anything you can think about the Caribbean, you can think about what happened in the sugar plantations of the Caribbean or the cotton plantations of the South, anything you can think about was for profit. Was for profit. So what you have is an imperial strategy and a governance strategy built around extracting for profit. And the Africans in the Pan-African Congress are saying they reject that. They reject that idea of being ruled by private wealth and for private profit. Now, this is the big issue, and I'll come back to it in a minute. So I think it is important we keep that in mind. Okay, the third set of issues I want to talk about, and this is maybe second or third last set of issues I'll talk about, is the constitutional symbolism and significance of the Congress. Now, where is the symbolism? Now, I have already talked about the flags and how they were displayed and what the meaning behind each of these flags is. Okay, let's think about the moment. When is this happening? Let's think about this moment. The moment is October 1945. I think the Second World War had ended in May or June. I think it's May or June. So this is barely 3-4 months after the end of the Second World War. So, so this is a moment for introspection. And that introspection has two components. And this enactment and these discussions that are taking place in the Congress, it doesn't come out directly, but these two issues are important. The first issue is, it is a moment to reflect on the general devastation of World War II. It's a moment to think about the general devastation of World War II. Between 60 to 75 million people have been killed. Out of that, nearly 50 million are civilians. 25 million are the soldiers. So that is the entire population of Kenya plus has been killed. That's equivalent in this war. And it represented at that time 3% of global population. So this is devastating. And I think we need to keep this in mind, that we are meeting in the shadow of mass death. The Congress is happening in the shadow of mass death. Now, the second issue on which we are introspecting in this meeting is thousands upon thousands of African people who had fought alongside their colonizers. There were 1 million African soldiers, more than 1 million African soldiers in the Second World War. And if you want to read this story, it doesn't relate to the Second World War, but it mentions it. Read British historian David Olusoga. I think he's of Nigerian origin. David Olusoga, The World's War. It will provide you with a very interesting background. So you got a moment for introspection. You got this mass deaths, and you got this, the sacrifice borne by the African. And I think you can see this running through this enactment, where the question of Africans have shed blood, they have made sacrifices for their oppressors. What are the oppressors prepared to give up for the Africans? And it turns out nothing, okay? So that is the first element I want to talk about, moment of introspection. Secondly, it is also an ironic moment. It's an ironic moment for Africans who have been fighting to liberate others. Remember why Africans are fighting in this war. They've been drafted to go and help liberate others. But they themselves are not liberated. So it's a peculiarly ironic moment, because they are living without self-determination. They are living without political or economic freedom. They are living under racial injustice. They've been fighting against the economic occupation by Germany, the denial of economic freedom by the Germans. They've been fighting against lack of self-determination that the Germans had imposed across East Central Europe and Northern Europe. So it is a very ironic moment if you are an African. And then, remember that immediately after the war, Africans who are fighting, other than getting killed, they have returned home. And they returned home and discovered that, first, colonial injustice wasn't going to go away. Because when they got back home, in Kenya, for example, we had what was called the Second Soldier Settlement Scheme, where the soldiers, Mzungu soldiers who came back were given land, but the African who had fought with them were not given anything. The African veterans returned home to poverty, okay? and they were often erased from the history of the world wars. In fact, until very recently, thanks to the work of historians like David Olusoga, the role, the fact that Africans were involved to the scale that they were involved in the Second World War has been virtually unknown. We knew Africans participated, but if you ask most people, they'll tell you maybe 100,000, maybe 50,000. But to know that it's 1 million plus just tells you that there is a lot about this history that has not been told has not been told properly. So now, I want to focus on the third level of symbolism, which is the deeper constitutional dimensions of this irony that we are talking about. So the first one is the role of Africans in ideas of limited government, separation of powers, and the end of despotic monarchies. For 300 years, our relationship with Europe was a very interesting one. Remember that the Europeans and the Americans were under despotic monarchies. The Africans were playing a role in sustenance of these despotic monarchies because the Africans were supplying the labor for the prosperity of these despotic monarchies. Now, the Europeans, feeding off the ideas of the Enlightenment, the ideas of autonomy, human autonomy, the ideas of liberty, they had overthrown the ideas of equality. They had overthrown the despotic monarchies, yeah, and created new systems of power based on separation of powers, separation on an enforceable Bill of Rights. They had created new systems based on that. Ironically, the prosperity they were enjoying had been created by Africans on one hand. Number two, the Africans had been involved in very significant ways in, for example, the American War of Independence. And the role of African soldiers in the American War of Independence is a little bit like the role of African soldiers in the Second World War. It is not told as fully as it should be told, but they were also involved in that war. And then finally, the Haitian example, when the Africans decided to do what the Europeans had done, which is to cite ideas of the Enlightenment about human equality, about human rights, when they decided to do the same thing so that they could claim the same liberties that the Europeans had claimed against their own monarchs, they were crushed. This is what happened in Haiti. Yeah? So that the first component of this, what's happening in Manchester, is for us to think about that the ideas we study in constitutional law, separation of powers and whatever, in the background, the story that is untold is how the objective conditions for the liberties that was enjoyed by Europeans had been created by Africans. And that without, see, if you go back to Greece, let me just try and make this real. If you go back to Greece, the Greeks were shameless. They admitted that the only reason why they were free is because they had all these slaves who helped to make them, to create a free society. What is not admitted in the West is that the way the West enjoys freedom, those freedoms were created in large part by African slavery and African indentured labor. So that's the first idea, that constitutional idea that I want us to take from this. The second constitutional idea is to look at the role of Africans in the First World War and in the right to self-determination. If you think about a constitution has separation of powers, checks and balances, and Bill of Rights. But you can't have a constitution without a right to self-determination. Okay? The right to self-determination is the major result of First World War. Okay? And what happened in the First World War? In the First World War, the land empires of Europe collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Prussian Empire, the Russian Empire, the empires collapsed. And a lot of countries came out of that process. And one of the first things that the Americans said through Woodrow Wilson is that the right to self-determination is a fundamental right of peoples. Again, a lot of Africans died in the Second World War, in the First World War, and they died as carrier cause. If you know any place in East Africa all the way to Mozambique called 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐿. Any place that you know that's called 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐿, it's named after these guys. Because when they came back from the war, they were settled in places within the urban areas. And those places used to be called carrier corps. They're the people who used to carry things during the war. They died in very large numbers, by the way, because there was a disease, a form of COVID-19 that broke out in 1918, which the Americans called the Spanish flu, even though the disease had come from America, which is very ironical. The disease had actually come from America, but they decided it's the Spanish flu, because the Americans who carried the disease to Europe were actually in Spain. So they decided to give the disease to the Spaniards. So the Africans were integral to the circumstances that created the right to self-determination, but they themselves are not going to get it. So we have been in this game of creating the conditions for things, but not being beneficiaries of them. Fast forward to the Second World War. The Second World War, again, I want to talk about the role of the Africans in the Second World War and the Universal Declaration of Rights. The notion of universal rights arises directly out of the Second World War, okay? We've already discussed the number of Africans who died in the Second World War. There's a number of Africans who are involved in the Second World War. So if, again, you have Africans, they are part of the scheme that creates a world in which universal human rights can be claimed for all people, except the Africans. So universal rights are claimed for everybody else after the Second World War, but they are not claimed for Africans. So I want you to understand what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is this. The meeting in Manchester is very momentous, philosophically, emotionally, and politically. Because philosophically, we've been part of this, at the coalface of fighting for all these big ideas in constitutional law, separation of powers, checks and balances, self-determination, universal human rights. We've been at the coalface of fighting for these rights, and yet we are meeting to discuss because we've been denied all. That's what Manchester is about, okay? I think it's extremely important that you internalize this as you read the enactment. Let me just wind up now by saying a few things about how to derive full value from this enactment, okay? I think it is very important, now that you've been reading it, thinking that you're going to act it out. I don't want you to act it out. I want you to read it and think about it, okay? I want you to read this and think about it. And I want you to think about, first of all, think about who are the people who are in this meeting. The key personalities. Kwame Nkrumah was there, Jomo Kenyatta was there, Dr. Hastings Banda was there. There were some Pan-African luminaries, you know, Du Bois, George Padmore. George Padmore is not as well known as Du Bois to a lot of Pan-Africanists, but to a lot of would-be Pan-Africanists, not Pan-Africanists would know him. But he was a medical doctor who had a very strong philosophical orientation. The interesting thing is that there have been a lot of outstanding black doctors who then drift off to philosophy. Frantz Fanon, George Padmore, there are a few others. There were a number of students. The women were underrepresented. Now, what I want you to think about as you go through this document, think about the things that are being said in this meeting. The Africans are saying, for example, that they have suffered a long period of betrayals and broken promises. We've already discussed that because we were part of these struggles that created the constitutional principles we enjoy, but we never benefited from them. They have spoken at length about basic needs as basic rights. When you read through this enactment, one of the things that comes across very strongly is the idea that basic needs are basic rights, and that rights are interconnected. You can see what Joseph Anani is saying, the unionist from Gold Coast, which is Ghana. He's saying, we fully agree with political freedom, but before we have political freedom, we must have something in our stomachs so we can fight on. Otherwise, we might die before we get freedom. This is Anand speaking like Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte used to say, an army marches on its stomach. Then I want you to see the issue that we are still talking about today, issues of equity and land question. So there is a whole lot of conversation, and I think you can see it in the conversation by Dr. Raphael Amato, where he's talking about unless Africans are allowed to market our products abroad, we will not be able to reap any benefit at all from our land. And this is true of the minerals Africa is trying to mine. By the way, the biggest issue today as we speak in Africa about freedom is resource sovereignty. What sovereignties do we have of our own resources? Yeah? I would encourage you to go through this as closely as I'm advising you to. One last thing I want to say, and I think it's very insightful because Mahmoud Mamdani, who you may have heard about, makes this point very strongly. And the point they make here is that the South African apartheid state is a symbol of the African colonial state. There was always this view in South African apartheid studies that apartheid was a special type of state. But Mamdani makes the point that no, the apartheid state is just a form of the colonial state. And this is the point that is being made in this enactment. And I want you to look, for example, at what Jomo Kenyatta says. Jomo Kenyatta basically makes the point, apartheid is not exceptional. He says, Jomo Kenyatta underlines the similarities between South African apartheid system and the system in force in Kenya. He says, in Kenya, the oppressors have imported from South Africa some of the methods about which we had yesterday. And we did not just import the methods, we also imported some of the kaburus into Kenya. There is a lot more that I could say about this subject, but I shan't do that. So for me, the thing is, I want you to keep a lens that sees these threads of economic sovereignty, basic rights, resource sovereignty, those issues running through this entire enactment. Thank you.
In October 1945, the guns had at last fallen silent after the deadliest of the world wars. Across the world, people were still picking up the pieces, clearing the rubble from the destruction. Thousands upon thousands of servicemen and women of African descent had fought valiantly alongside their colonizers and oppressors. Many had sacrificed their lives. Having fought to liberate others, they would not simply stop there. They were burning with yearnings for freedom and justice for themselves. So, from more than 20 countries across the globe, up to 200 delegates and participants converged on the Charlton Hall in the city of Manchester. Future Presidents Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and Dr. Hastings Banda were joined by such Pan-African luminaries as Dr. William Edward Du Bois and George Padmore, whose account inspired this reenactment. Today, Monday the 15th of October 1945, Amy Ashud Garvey, the eminent Jamaican feminist and activist, is chairing the first session as the 5th Pan-African Congress formally opens.
Good morning and welcome to Manchester, delegates. My name is Amy Ashud Garvey and I have joined you from Jamaica. It is a great honor to chair this first session of the 5th Pan-African Congress, which will consider the situation in Britain, our host country. Many of you have traveled from across the globe, crossing the oceans to get here. We know some of your journeys have been hard and long, so thank you for being here. Some of you were no doubt expecting to see the Lord Mayor, but we have agreed that we will begin our deliberations and have the official opening once Alderman Jackson is available. It is therefore my pleasure to now invite our dear friend, Dr. Peter Milliard, the President of the Pan-African Federation, to welcome us all formally. He is one of the main organizers of this Congress. Dr. Milliard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I welcome all of you delegates very warmly to this 5th Congress. Madam Chairman, the response to this Congress has simply been tremendous. Our people are ready for the call of freedom. We cannot and must not fail them. But first, allow me to acknowledge the tireless work of Dr. William Edward Baghdad Dubois. He's made this Congress happen. You can all agree with me that this Congress is really his child. We, the organizers, drew up the agenda for the discussion. It is now for you delegates to express your views. This is very much a Congress. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Milliard. To start us off on our theme, I will now call upon Dr. Edwin Duplan from Liverpool.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have just come to the end of another war, but I want to begin with the war of 1914 to 1918. In that war, many people of color played a significant part in the defense of Britain. Although they were promised employment and benefits in their valiant contribution, those promises were never honored. Despite their qualifications, they could not secure employment. The majority lived below subsistence level, on the dole, on public assistance. Now, when another war broke out in 1939, many more Africans came to England. Some found work in factories and the forces, including the Air Force. But even though this gave Africans a sense of belonging, they have remained victims of the caliber. This must change.
Thank you, Mr. Duplan. Let me now invite Mr. A.S. Moselle, who represents an association in Cardiff, in Wales.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to address the Congress. Cardiff has the largest population of people of color in Great Britain. This is mainly because black seamen are given employment only on ships that carry coal, and Cardiff is the largest coal port. There has been intermarriage. There always is. So, we now have a community of younger people of mixed race in Cardiff, but the Department of Labor has failed to provide training or employment to them. Though these young people were born in Britain with mothers and grandparents here, we still hear some people say they should migrate to Africa.
Thank you for that sobering report about the situation of young people in Cardiff. I am now pleased to call upon my fellow Jamaican, Miss Alma Labadi. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Chairman. It is a great honor to speak during this session. I come here to express my concern about the plight of the children of the Black American troops who are stationed here in Britain. You may know that some of the troops had relationships and even babies with white women, including some women whose husbands were serving overseas. Now that the husbands are returning, there is a problem. Many want these children out of their homes as price for saving their marriage. We therefore need to provide for these little ones who have been rejected. And fortunately, there is now a home that can take them in, but we need money. We need a committee for their welfare. We cannot allow these children to suffer for the mistakes of their fathers and mothers. I come to ask this Congress for support.
Thank you, Ms. Labadi, for raising this practical and urgent issue. Indeed, this Congress must do everything in its power to support these children. I will now invite Mr. Samuel Andrews to take the floor.
Madam Chairman, we are at last taking up the challenge to fight for our rights. The challenge is heavy and the journey will be long, but our shoulders are broad, and as I look around this room, I see that strength and will to succeed. The British government must educate our children properly. It must also provide decent homes, and I mean homes, not shacks. Congress, we will no longer beg for our rights. The government must know that we, the people of African descent, have joined hands from all over the British Empire to demand our proper place. We demand justice. We demand our just share in the winning of the peace. Madam Chairman, Africans from all over the world died for freedom. we are prepared to die for peace.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. We certainly share that determination for freedom. Next to speak, I will call upon our students, Mr. Graf Johnson from Edinburgh. You have the floor, Mr. Graf Johnson.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. It is a great honor to address this congregation. We, as students, we have not always followed the works of the Pan-African very closely, and this has made our struggles even more difficult. Allow me to speak frankly. We, as students, have sometimes been regarded with great suspicion, but I'm very happy that this meeting is welcoming us into the Pan-African family. We hope that out of this, a new solidarity will be born. We must work together to put an end to these imperialists who are working against us.
Thank you, Mr. de Graaf Johnson, for that impassioned call. All students are very welcome at this Congress and in the movement, and we want to see more of your passion and commitment. And I think the Lord Mayor may be here now.
All rise to the Lord Mayor of Manchester and the Mandela. Please be seated. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I feel a special pleasure and privilege in receiving His Worship, the Lord Mayor of Manchester. For 21 years, I have lived in Manchester and therefore consider myself a Mancunian. I believe Manchester is the most liberal city in England. Why do I say this? One example. In the American Civil War between 1861 and 1865, the North blockaded the ports of the cotton-producing South. So American cotton grown by slave labor could not reach the cotton mills of Manchester and Lancashire. While the British mill owners wanted the British government to send warships to break the blockade, the cotton industry workers here in the north of England stood up resolutely against any idea of breaking the blockade. So the British mill owners from Manchester and Lancashire helped to destroy slavery in the United States. Therefore, the action should never be forgotten. It is therefore no surprise to us, Madam Chairman, that the Lord Mayor accepted to address the Congress. He is simply continuing the great tradition of Manchester, solidarity. Lord Mayor, this Congress welcomes you to address us.
Thank you, Dr. Milliard, for those kind words of welcome. Madam Chairman and esteemed delegates, indeed I'm delighted and greatly honored to be opening this 5th Congress of the Pan-African Movement. Thank you for choosing Manchester. I welcome you all to our great city. I trust that you are already experiencing the hospitality for which this city is known. I am sorry that I could not be with you at the start of the proceedings, but I am told you have already had some very important discussions. Friends, the matters you will discuss over the next few days will be of real consequence here and across the world. I am confident that by the end, this Congress will have generated new ideas and inspired a deepened resolve to build a better, fairer world after the terrible destruction of the war. Please be assured that in our city of Manchester, your struggles will always have a true friend. It is now my honor to declare this Congress open.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for those genuine words of welcome. Delegates, on your behalf, I would like to move a vote of thanks to the Lord Mayor. I call upon Mr. Wallace Johnson, who will second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe that this afternoon will go down in history. In future, we will recall that here in Manchester, this day, we demanded equal status and equal rights, not merely to exist, but to live in the real sense of the word. Therefore, I thank the Mayor for honoring the Congress with his presence. I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace Johnson. The motion passes. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Welcome to the second day of the Congress, which will discuss imperialism in North and West Africa. My name is George Padmo. My task is to invite Dr. Dubois to preside over this session. A distinguished and untiring scholar, he epitomizes the struggles and aspirations of 13 million of our people in the United States. He is indeed the father of Pan-Africanism. Welcome. The chair is yours, Dr. Dubois.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Congress. I deeply appreciate this honor. I do bring the greetings of our people from America and elsewhere. Let me straight away invite our friend Mr. Kwame Nkrumah from the Gold Coast to present to us the political and economic situation in the North and West Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and delegates. Congress, 6 years of senseless slaughter and devastation have just ended. And everywhere, in all corners of the earth, people are celebrating the end of the difficult and costly struggle. They celebrate not so much with joy as with an immense sense of relief. Friends, we do not and cannot feel secure for as long as imperialism exists. Imperialism is one of the major causes of war. Imperialism seeks domination at all levels, and we must understand that imperialism is prepared to use violence to achieve its objectives. I say we must therefore resist imperialism. We must mobilize strong and vigorous action to eradicate imperialism from our continent of Africa. Therefore, we must and will organize ourselves and as a continent act together so that we are both effective and united in the fight against imperialism. And for this fight, for this cause, we must all be willing to sacrifice everything.
Thank you, Mr. Nkrumah. May I now call upon Mr. Joseph Annan, who is a trade unionist. He is from the Gold Coast. You have the floor, Mr. Annan.
Comrades, I am here as a workman who wields tools and as a man who knows no color. Nothing we do here means anything unless we implement our resolution. Only then will this Congress be a force that governments cannot ignore. Before this Congress breaks up on Sunday, we should therefore set up an office to handle the challenges ahead. In this regard, my workers asked me to inform you that they are prepared to spend their last penny to maintain a Pan-African office in London. That is a practical issue. We fully agree with political freedom. But before we have political freedom, we must have something in our stomachs so we can fight on. We might die before we get freedom. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Annan. Yes, we will surely need a strong organization to champion our Pan-African ideals and struggles for freedom. Let me now invite Mr. Blaise, a student leader from Nigeria. He will be followed by Mr. Williams of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of our members who are collaborating with the occupiers on the external strategy. We must mobilize international public opinion and attention to the terrible conditions in Africa. In addition, we should establish a Pan-African Congress Continuation Committee. Such a committee would ensure that our momentum is not lost. We must not lend ourselves to this system of domination of man by man and race by race. We must all fight towards one goal, the independence of Africa. So I say, freedom is our right, and we must fight until we get it.
Congress, whenever we have called for change, the colonial office has always told us, there is a happy land far, far away. We have come to this Congress to see that we can make that happy land our own. When the war between the imperialists came, the Nigerian government vested its mineral wealth in the crown. But Britain now says that every mineral in the Nigerian ground must come to them. Today, Nigeria contributes to the revenue of this country, but our people are getting nothing in return. It is time to right these wrongs.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Indeed, our happy lands are still far, far away. I will now invite our colleague, Dr. Raphael Amato from Togoland, who will report on the situation in the several territories across French-speaking West Africa. Dr. Amato, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegates, West Africa south of the Sahara, up to the Congo, is much larger than Western Europe. It has a population of 60 million. In the territory under French rules, the majority do not receive sufficient education. French Africans feel that it is better to be governed badly by our own people than to be governed well by anyone else. I begin with the Congo. Its population is 12 million, but their prospects are very poor indeed. In the Congo, ill-equipped Belgian workers are displacing Africans in lower-grade jobs. Africans are allowed only vocational training for working in the mines and in the plantations. There is limited higher education. One school trains Catholic priests, the other is for medical assistants and nurses. For the Belgian Africans, opportunities are non-existent, except for the back-breaking work in the mines or tapping rubber. The history of the Belgian Congo is indeed tragic. Let me conclude with the land question. Across West Africa, we have always owned the land communally, but the Europeans are separating us from the land. They are only concerned with the economic exploitation and do not care about the condition of the African people. For the Europeans, it seems always to be minimum profit with the maximum profit with the minimum efforts. Unless we, the African, are allowed to market our products abroad, we'll never be able to reap any profits from our land. This is one of the things that must change. I thank you, Congress, for the opportunity to share my views. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amato, for that presentation. You have described an equally grim expression of imperialism and oppression in the French-speaking parts of Africa. This truly calls for solidarity. For the next session, we will consider the grave matter of oppression in South Africa. To present the situation, I invite Mr. Mako and Mr. Peter Abrahams to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very touched that the welcome we have received from the President of Manchester. I bring this Congress greetings from the oppressed people of South Africa. Congress, the 2 million white people of English and Dutch descent live by the exploitation and degradation of the 8 million black people. The white minority controls 230 million acres of land, while the blacks are squeezed onto 7 million acres. South Africa segregates the Africans and people of color. All legislation is based upon discrimination. Africans don't have a vote, but pay high poll and hard taxes, irrespective of whether they are employed. The life of the African is nasty, brutish, and short. The infant mortality rate is extraordinarily high. In towns, Africans are herd into so-called locations. These are nothing more than overcrowded ghettos with atrocious conditions. We are forced to live in dwellings that we cobble together from discarded packaging. And the darkness and the dirt is everywhere. Piles of rubbish breed all manner of diseases. Tuberculosis is rampant and deadly. Dysentery, syphilis, and other diseases also take many lives. In the mines, Europeans earn 10 times more than blacks for the same work. On the farm, the black laborer earns a mere pittance. But the black worker must still pay the same prices for food as the European, who enjoys one of the highest standards of living in the world. An African is not permitted to perform any skilled labor and does not enjoy the protection of industrial and social legislation. No unemployment pay, no pension, no insurance. While white workers have unionized to fight for them, Africans are still not allowed to unionize. Congress, we are completely muzzled and politically suffocated. Whenever we want to voice any protest, the Righteous Assembly Act is used to stop us from meeting. My brothers and sisters, the lot of the African in South Africa is one of the most wrenched in the world. Please, please, help us to break the bonds which shackle us to this intricate system.
Comrades, black South Africans live under the most oppressive laws. Consider the past laws. Africans must carry at all times their poll and hard tax receipts. This act as passes to permit travel. An African must carry 10 other receipts and papers. A pass is needed to leave the reserve to go to town. Another pass is required to travel on the railway. A different one to seek work. Then there is this pass to visit another location. Do not forget the pass to stay out after the 9 o'clock curfew hour. Hey, an urban pass. Without this, you cannot live within a municipal area. And yet, another pass is needed to carry out a trade. On and on it goes. Even a teacher or a preacher requires a special pass so that they shouldn't carry these other passes. Africans are fined left, right, and center for all manner of trivial infringements of any number of capricious rules and regulations. And from these punitive fines, the coffers of the oppressive state swell and swell. Africans have been driven from their lands and forced to seek other work to survive. But are they offered any other employment? Certainly not. Although they pay the bulk of the taxes, Africans are denied the benefits of education. Imagine, the government spends only two pounds per year on each African child, but the government spends 10 times more on the European child. And when the night falls, the repressions only increase. Police routinely raid places where Africans live, rounding up, beating up those who do not instantly produce tax receipts. People are carted off to overcrowded jails in sinister-looking vans called Black Marias. The next morning, without a wink of sleep, they are arraigned in droves before indifferent magistrates who dish out punitive fines. Comrades, we have shared some of the hard, ugly facts about South Africa. This is the evidence we must use to indict an imperial British government, which after 40 years of trusteeship has left the native population of South Africa illiterate, sentencing them to abject poverty and to the living conditions of slaves.
It is the 17th of October 1945. Welcome to the third day of the Congress. Today, our attention shifts to East Africa. Dr. Dubois continues in the chair. Mr. Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya is presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My task this morning is a difficult one. I will report on several territories and speak on behalf of nearly 14 million East Africans living under colonial domination, with many alienated from their lands. First, I will talk about Uganda. In Uganda, the people grow coffee and cotton, but there is not a single African doctor in the country. Early this year, Ugandans held a big strike to protest political and economic oppression. Ugandans are resisting the colonial situation and need the support of their international friends in the fight for change. Now, Tanganyika, Africans also grow coffee and cotton. But during the war, many Africans were conscripted to work on white-owned sisal plantations. Although the price of sisal increased during the war, African pay did not increase. British control everything, but claim Tanganyikans will never be able to govern themselves. Well, I ask you, if you are paid a pittance and you must pay heavy taxes, how can you be expected to improve your standard of living? I now come to Kenya, my beloved country. In Kenya, the oppressors have imported much from South Africa. Some of the methods we have had here today. The Native Land Ordinance in 1915 made all African lands crown land. Suddenly, we became tenants in our own lands. Under native registration law, all adult African males must have their fingerprints taken. Imagine, men who had fought in the First World War for freedom must now be fingerprinted like common criminals. Every man must carry a registration certificate in a little box in Kiswahili we call kipande. This box must be worn with a string around your neck, a real albatross. And you must produce that certificate whenever the police or an employer demands to see it. Otherwise, imprisonment or a stiff fine will follow. To education, every year, the colonial administration spends less than £1 for each African. But for the European child, £27. And finally, a word about Somaliland. Much of Somaliland has been fighting the British government for over 25 years. Their resistance is a powerful illustration of our African resolve to rid ourselves of our colonizers. I believe that it is only through political independence that we, the African peoples, can truly be free. Only independence can deliver to us the things we demand. Racial discrimination must end. We want full rights of citizenship. This is the desire. No, this is the demand of each African. Independence! Uhuru!
Mr. Kenyatta, thank you very much for that most enlightening, if disturbing, account on East Africa. We are in no doubt that with your determination, you will surely have Uhuru one day.
The East African session was followed by presentations on Central Africa, including Southern Rhodesia and Nyasaland. Those reports indicated that, like in Kenya, through policies of land alienation and restrictive laws, the colonial administrations gave preference to white settlers at the expense of native Africans. For the second session of the third day, the Congress turned to the situation in Ethiopia and the black republics of Haiti and Liberia. Dr. Dubois continues in the chair.
I am delighted to welcome Mr. Ras Makonnen of Ethiopia. We all know him affectionately as Mark. He is a true and committed Pan-Africanist, but he is also that rare thing, a successful businessman. Right here in Manchester, he has demonstrated what Africans can achieve in difficult circumstances. Mark has been extremely generous to the Congress, helping cover the cost of our meetings and hosting many of us in his hotels. Equally, we are also benefiting from his political ideas. I now invite him to present on the situation in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much for that most kind introduction, Dr. Dubois. I'd like to add my humble welcome to everyone. This afternoon, I appeal to you on behalf of Ethiopia. Although historians may differ about when the Second World War began, we must all remember 1st October 1935. That is when the Italians declared war on Ethiopia. The same Italians later massacred 5,000 of our students in Addis Ababa. Many of those slain have spent years in universities of Europe and America. The finest of our young people perished at the hands of the occupiers. The Ethiopian people endured tyranny for 7 years, until 1941, when our supposed collaborators, the British, now thought it was wise to enlist our help to drive out the Italians. I know most of you believe that Ethiopia is a free sovereign state, but you must remember then, in March 1941, a treaty was signed between British and Ethiopia, when the emperor was not in the best position to make many demands. The British claimed they needed to use Ogaden, the Somali-speaking region of Ethiopia, to prepare for their imminent Egyptian campaign. They then promised to help the emperor in exchange for occupying Ogaden. But the British now want to adjoin the Ogaden to the British and the Italian Somaliland. They think this will enlarge their empire. In return, the British claim they are prepared to hand back Ethiopia, a part of Eritrea that Italy had grabbed. Although another issue is that Britain lent to Ethiopia £2 million for reconstruction. But Ethiopians do not see the bulk of that money. Most of it goes to paying the salaries of Europeans in Ethiopia, as you can see. The imperialists have tried different ways to undermine the sovereignty of Ethiopia. I therefore plead, comrades, that you support and advance the legitimate claims of that Ethiopian people to put a stop to imperialist opportunism.
Thank you very much, Mr. Makonnen, for your illuminating presentation on a country that is very dear to our hearts. Let me now invite back Mr. Peter Abrahams to speak about the Free States.
Congress, there are only 3 states in the world that are free in the sense that they are run and controlled by black people. I speak of Haiti, Liberia, and Ethiopia. It is of utmost importance that we are most vigilant in protecting these 3 states. Some of the more radical socialists are internationalists who do not believe in the nation state. As a matter of principle, they do not, therefore, support sovereignty claims. I respectfully disagree. Before one can speak of international liberty, one must first secure national liberation.
Thank you, Mr. Abrahams. I hope the Congress will allow me to add my voice on this matter of the Free States. Through the years, there has been propaganda in the United States, particularly against the ability of black people to rule themselves. But I have visited all 3 of these states. I was impressed by their ability to rule and their various achievements, often under very difficult circumstances. And we will do well to remember that what we know about black countries has possibly been learned through the white writers. Well, on that note, we conclude our discussion on the Black Republics. And that also brings our business of the third day of the Congress to an end. The meeting is adjourned to tomorrow.
It is the 18th of October 1945, the fourth day of the Congress. The session continues with a discussion of the Caribbean. Dr. Dubois is in the chair. Mr. George Padmore takes the floor.
Good morning, and thank you very much, esteemed chair and colleagues. Briefly, the West Indies could be described as the sugar sector of the British imperialism. In the West Indies, you have a government of sugar, for sugar, and by sugar. Sugar dominates every aspect of life. Several islands and some territory of the South American continent constitute the West Indies. Some are under the French, some under the British or American rule. Others are claimed by the Dutch. After Christopher Columbus landed in the 15th century, the indigenous people were simply exterminated. Later, in the search for agricultural labor, the Spanish turned to Africa. This is how slave trade began. The Spanish were followed by the French and British, who also used Africa as a reservoir of labor to work the sugar plantations. This is how the African population came to the West Indies. After 3 miserable centuries of slavery, the Africans were emancipated in 1851. But the question of labor came up again. This time, the landowners went to Asia, from where they indentured Indian labor. So across the West Indies, you'll find large Indian communities living side by side with the descendants of African slaves. There are other races too. The Chinese were also brought as laborers. In addition, we find Portuguese and other Europeans. Despite this diversity, I do not know of racial fights between the different groups. That, friends, is the historical context of the West Indies.
Thank you, George, for that educative overview on the social and political history of the West Indies. I will now call upon Mr. Earwood, who will be followed by Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am from the Barbados Progressive League and Workers' Union. Our league believes that equitable distribution of wealth cannot be achieved until the sources of that wealth are controlled by a people's government on behalf of the community. What do we want? We demand a higher standard of living for workers. First, they need higher wages, but they also need better health and better housing. We also demand free compulsory education and better pay for teachers. Mr. Chairman, we strongly support the Federation of the West Indies because the future of Barbados is inseparably bound up with the rest of the Caribbean. Unless you cooperate, the major economic and social problems of the region will not be solved. These are the priorities of our union.
Distinguished delegates, I bring you fraternal greetings from British Guyana. We are the only British possession in South America. After listening to this conference and hearing about the low wages paid to our African comrades, I realized I had no idea how bad conditions in other countries were. On the future, self-government is the only way for us to assert ourselves. I therefore agree with Mr. Earwood that we also need a West Indies Federation, and we must unite in our struggles. In Nigeria, the people are claiming complete independence. In America, the Africans are claiming equality and an end to racial discrimination. All over the world, wherever there are oppressed people, the demand for equality is ringing out and cannot be drowned out.
I thank Mr. Earwood and Mr. Harper for reminding us that the struggles for human dignity are indeed universal. May I invite Mr. Samuel Andrews to make the final presentation of this session.
Thank you for this great honor. I'm from Grenada, one of the once proud but now derelict islands of the British West Indies. Congress, we have been bled dry by the British imperialism. Grenada produces cocoa, nutmeg, and sugarcane, yet our people live in poverty. Education is woefully deficient. Sanitation, deplorable. Disease is rampant. Malaria, fever, dysentery, hookworm, and many other illnesses afflicting the population. The West Indies are being robbed and plundered. Although King Sugar is alive and well across the islands, the sweetness is not enjoyed by the workers. It is farms like 𝐾𝐿 and Lyle, it is farms that 𝐾𝐿 and Lyle that are making gigantic profits. Our eyes are wide open. I must warn the British government and the colonial office that we will not tolerate these injustices any longer. The Africans and people of African descent are on the march. We will not halt until we reach our goal.
And with those rousing words in our ears and the bitter taste of sugar in our mouths, we have come to the end of today's session. I will also be handing the chair to Dr. Peter Milliard. Thank you for your participation. This session is adjourned.
It is the final session of the 5th Congress. Dr. Peter Milliard is in the chair. Earlier in the day, Dr. Dubois was presented with a gift from the Congress to honor his contribution to the Pan-African movement.
Welcome to our final session. I am delighted to invite the esteemed Ms. 𝐼𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴 to address us. This time, she will be speaking on behalf of Jamaica. Please, you have the floor, Ms. Gabi.
Thank you, Dr. Milliard. It is a great honor to speak again to this Congress. A lot has been written and spoken of the black man, but for some reason, very little has been said about the black woman. She has simply been shunted into the background, an invisible childbearer, doing all the difficult work. The luckier Jamaican woman has an education and works in the civil service. Unfortunately, many are not active in politics. But the teachers, those are different. There are 10,000 black women in the schools of Jamaica. They are a very progressive movement, doing critical and indispensable work with our young people. Many women are also employed in the postal services, where they are a part of a vibrant trade union movement. Quietly, they do work for the development of Jamaica. But let us spare a thought for the poorer Jamaican woman who toils in the fields, takes goods to the market, or does other menial jobs, but receives much less pay than the man who does the same work. Where are the black men of Jamaica? Why do they do far too little to help the women to secure better wages? Because of the low standard of living in Jamaica, our people are emigrating in large numbers, and Jamaican women have gone along with our men. They are to be found in Cuba, Panama, America, and even this country. Congress, this is the pitiable lot of the black woman. We must change this.
Thank you, Ms. Gavi, for highlighting both the role and the plight of the black women. You also have rebuked all of us men, which needed to be done. We surely have not demonstrated enough support and solidarity for the black women. Thank you again. I'm now delighted to call upon Ms. Alma Labadi again. This time, she will be speaking on behalf of Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a great need for water in Jamaica. We are an agricultural country, but without adequate water supply. Water is carried by children, often across great distances. It's back-breaking work. Because of poor wages and poverty, children are often made to work alongside their parents. For example, for each ton of sugarcane that is cut, the laborer is paid only 1 shilling and 6 pence. So what do you think happens? The man takes his children along so that more money can be earned. Many children are born outside marriage. This is because the Jamaican woman has few means of livelihood and therefore gets into difficulties. And when young people get into trouble with the law, there are no juvenile courts or reform schools to rehabilitate them. If employment increases, then crime should decrease. It is therefore critical to invest in livelihoods, but the Church and State of England are not making any real efforts to put these things right. Don't get me wrong, the people of Britain are not unkind, rather they are entirely ignorant of the conditions under which people are living in the territories where the flag is flying. There should therefore be a free press throughout the world to make known the needs and deeds of humanity, especially the dark deeds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you once more, Ms. Labadi, for those typically insightful remarks. And now for the final part of this conference, we should like to formally receive and send our greetings and well wishes of this Congress. After each presentation, we will expect all of us delegates to endorse with an enthusiastic aye. First, we will hear a message from India. This will be delivered by Mr. Surat Ali of the Federation of the Indian Association in Great Britain. Mr. Ali, please join me.
It is an immense honor to be in Manchester and address this Congress today. I must say, the relations between India and Africa, despite of those common struggles, but this relationship is also historic. An Indian philosopher once said, as long as there is one person who is oppressed, all Indian nation is oppressed. And if this means that if one person is not emancipated, I cannot feel emancipated. This means that the message I want to bring to this congregation today is important, and on behalf of the Indian people in Britain. This common struggle should bring Indians and Africans closer to realizing their ancient relationship and to ensure the people of color should no longer be oppressed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. I need your affirmation. Congress? Aye. I now invite Mr. George Padmo to convey a message of support for India.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Standing Orders Committee, I propose the following resolution conveying solidarity with the Indian struggle. We, the representatives of African peoples and peoples of African descent, assembled at the 5th Pan-African Congress in Manchester, do hereby send fraternal greetings to the toiling masses of India through the Indian National Congress. We pledge our solidarity with the Indian struggle for national freedom and social emancipation. Let me hear your affirmation, Congress.
Aye.
Greetings of this Congress go to the people of Indonesia and Vietnam. The 5th Pan-African Congress, representing people of Africa and African descent, now in session in the city of Manchester, extends its fraternal greetings to the peoples of Indonesia and Vietnam in their struggle against Dutch and French imperialisms. The Congress pledges solidarity with them in their fight for national freedom and economic emancipation. We say, hands off Indonesia, hands off Vietnam.
Let me hear your affirmation once again. Congress? Aye. And finally, it is now my honor to welcome upon Dr. Dubois, our esteemed honorary chairman, to address the Congress. And this time round, he has demonstrated that he is our leader of our Pan-African movement. After his concluding remarks, he will lead us in the reciting the challenge to our colonial powers, and this Congress adopted earlier.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milliard. I am most touched by the generosity and the warmth I have received here in Manchester. I also want to thank you all, especially for this gift of a lighter, which I will treasure. As we come to the end of our fruitful and inspiring Congress, I want to remind us that when we consider great questions of this sort, we should not yield to any fears. It is perfectly clear to me, from the hearing of all that has been said, that the African peoples want the right to govern themselves. How this will come about or how it will be done, we shall have to wait and see. But we must impress upon the world that we cannot compromise our demand for self-government. We all want to believe that we can govern ourselves now, and that we can govern ourselves well. But that may not necessarily be true. Government, after all, is a matter of experience, long experience. And any people who have been deprived of self-government for a long time and then have it returned to them are liable to make mistakes. That is human and natural. But nonetheless, we are saying we have the right to make our own mistakes. Is that not how people learn? We must therefore have self-government, even if we make mistakes. And so, it is a profound honor for me to bring this momentous 5th Pan-African Congress to a close. May I therefore invite all of you delegates to stand up so that we can together reaffirm the statement we earlier adopted, which you have all seen, a challenge to the colonial powers. We, the delegates to the 5th Pan-African Congress, believe in peace.
How could it be otherwise when for centuries the African peoples have been victims of violence and slavery? Yet, if the Western world is still determined to rule humanity by force, then Africans, as a last resort, may have to appeal to force in the effort to achieve freedom. We are determined to be free. We want education. We want the right to earn a decent living, the right to express our thoughts and emotions, and to adopt and create forms of beauty. We demand for Black Africa autonomy and independence. So far, and no further than is possible in this one world, for groups and people to rule themselves subject to the inevitable world unity and federation. We are not ashamed to have been an age-long patient people. We continue willingly to sacrifice and strive, but we are unwilling to serve any longer while building our drudgery, or to support, by our poverty and ignorance, a false aristocracy and a discredited imperialism. We condemn the monopoly of capital and the rule of private wealth and industry for private profits alone. We welcome economic democracy as the only real democracy. Therefore, we shall complain, appeal, and arraign. We will make the world listen to the facts of our condition. We will fight in every way we can for freedom, democracy, and social betterment.
Thank you, comrades and friends. Keep up the struggle. Good luck to you all.
Hello. Clap for the delegates. Please. So we're quickly going to the next session, which is presided by our Chief Justice, Professor Willy Mutunga. He's going to supervise this last segment of this event today.
Good afternoon. I want to know the number of comments you want to make. How many? Okay, we compromise on 5. The first one. Yeah, on what has happened. Yes, please.
I appreciate this reenactment very deeply. For me, it was powerful to see the representation of Pan-Africanism from the Caribbean, the Americas, to Africa, and particularly to understand the challenges that were happening in specific parts of Africa. In Central Africa, we see extraction. In East Africa, we see the problem of taxation, cash crop farming, and settler colonialism. In Southern Africa, we see similar things. And just to, I guess, marvel, not in a good way, at how we are still grappling with these problems.
Thank you so much. The Honorable Chief Justice, let me stand. Allow me to take this opportunity to appreciate the team. That one was marvelous. And to say that I'm the chairman of Pan-African Congress, Kenyan chapter. I did miss what Professor was presenting, and it is very, very unfortunate. But to mention that if you look at all the Pan-African Congress resolutions since 1900 all the way to 1994, I don't want to talk about the 8th conference. You'll all agree with us that the 1945 one was the most important one, and you know what happened all the way to 1958, thereafter we had the OAU. So the first thing I would request is that Professor, if you'll be philanthropic enough to share with us your presentation, we'll really, really appreciate. Then number 2, to also say that we are proud of this university, to have thought about this and do that kind of a presentation is one of the many in the continent. I don't think that I've seen any within the continent, especially in Kenya. And more importantly, just to challenge the university leadership that across the world, we've seen various universities, especially in Europe, Russia, among others, even in US, the Lincoln University, having departments or schools that are dedicated for the studies of Pan-Africanism. With a lot of humility, Chief Justice, I don't think that there is such in Kenya. I'm aware that there is a center that is being started in Makerere, but there is none in Kenya. So I want to challenge the leadership of this great university that we can work hand in hand and ensure that is realized. Asanteni sana, comrades power. Asanteni sana.
You didn't give us your name, sir.
Well, the own Chief Justice, I said I'm Tulu Alfred, the chairman of Pan-African Congress, Kenyan chapter affiliated to the Global Pan-African Movement.
I'm sorry about that, Uzena Uzembe. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Gashehe. I'm a community organizer. As a Chief Justice, as that's what you have learned there. I was inspired by a representative from Nigeria in the 1945 Pan-African Congress. He was very articulate, powerful, and I have some gifts here for him. This is a book, Kenya Organic Intellectual, Reflection on the Legacy of 𝐾-𝐬𝐬. He was one of the great Pan-African in East Africa. And there is this book, William Tunga also has said something about. 𝐾-𝐬𝐬 has long been the unsung martyr in Kenya, a revolutionary history. It is a real mark for the consciousness of the new generation of organic intellectual from the Social Justice Center that they choose to read, discuss, and critique and write about 𝐾-𝐬𝐬. Okay, this. Okay, from Tanzania, the Wakili.
All protocols observed, your Chief Justice and all comrades. I am Owino Stephen Paul. I'm Director and Head of Programs at Pan-African Congress Kenya. That is the Kenyan chapter of the Global Pan-African Movement. Mr. Tulu Alfred is our chairman, and we are very much enthusiastic by the kind of presentation that you have done. I don't know if you have a club or something of the Pan-African movement, then we want to baptize you and institutionalize so that we can work together to achieve or to continue the agenda of the modern day Pan-Africanism, and also to enlighten us and the public about the history of Pan-African movement. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Sandra Barendo. Allow me to sit. My name is Sandra Barendo. I'm a fourth-year student in Kabarak University, and I've really enjoyed the play, especially the part where, what's the name? The Indian representative was talking about people of color solidarity. And of course, I've seen a lot of discourse with black activists saying, is there people of color solidarity? Because most of the times when an issue to do with race arises, we see other races, other people ganging up against black folks, unfortunately. And I think it's really interesting to know that even Izo Masiku, isn't those days that people of color solidarity was there, but I really enticed to know more about people of color solidarity, and is it really functioning? Thank you.
Your Lordship, Professor William Mutunga, comrades and friends, mine is a minor comment that what we see today, the struggle we're having today for the respect for the dignity of men and women is not new. So we are justified by our forefathers, by our great-great-grandfathers, and by the friends that remain inspirational. So the struggle must continue. Mapambano yaendelee. Oh, my name is Tito. I'm from Tanzania.
My name is 𝐏𝐶 from Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, a French-speaking country. I'm very happy to be here. And when I see my dear fellows taking the floor, they are very impressive. So we come here also to learn about the issue of Pan-Africanism and to learn about our experiences. And when we come back in Côte d'Ivoire, we can share this issue with our friends. So thank you very much. Pan-Africanism is in practice. We come here to practice Pan-Africanism to learn lesson of Pan-Africanism that we can also teach to our friends who are Côte d'Ivoire to also know what's happening here. Thank you very much.
Viva Comrades, Viva. And I'm Jerry Mwangi from the Social Justice Movement in Nairobi. And I also work with Informal Workers Cooperative in Mathare. My comrade here is also a French speaker, but she's a queen from Burkina Faso. She has said hi. I think from the reenactment, I think one of the things that came out strongly from Asha Gavi is the role of women. I think most of the time when we are reading history and the history of Pan-Africanism, we don't see and read much about women, but we saw how women were part of the process and how also they got to articulate the role of women and what was going on at that particular point. So I think this is also just a rallying call because I know this side has dominated the conversation. It's also because we are from a forum where we are speaking about Pan-Africanism and how do we make it people-centered, is also to making sure that young women and intellectual women also participate in birthing a new process of Pan-Africanism, where it's grounded on youth, now that we are seeing that the youth of Africa in particular are rising up to reclaim their dignity. Thank you.
All protocols observed. My name is Mufutu Valentino, a student here at Kabarak University. And I'm learning from the play that the same way the Pan-Africanists in Kenyatta, Nkrumah fought the colonialism, it is also our time, we as the youths, to fight the inequality, to fight corruption, to fight unemployment, because this is our time. They did their part for us to enjoy what we're enjoying today. We are also called to fight our fights that we are facing today. Thank you.
Excuse me. Those who want to make comments, I think you should line up here so that you don't have to put your hands. So just line up here, you speak, and then go back and sit.
Good evening, and great to be here. My name is 𝐏𝐞-𝐞𝐧𝐵 Angalapo. I work with the Center for Democracy and Development in Nigeria. I mean, again, nice representation of Nigeria, and including the accent. Good, great one. So I think that what we should take away from this is that all of us can actually do something. We saw the student union actively, pushing for Pan-Africanism. I mean, we are all students here at different levels and professionals. What can we do at this particular time? Still being faced with these challenges. So beyond dramatizing it, it's also a call for us to do something about the current situations that we have here. And for someone that works in the Center for Democracy and Development, I'm always attracted with that concept of economic democracy. I don't know whether or not we've achieved it yet, but it's something that we need to think about.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is difficult to pronounce. I am Ngqabuto Nicholas Mapena, an African born in Zimbabwe, based in South Africa. This has been an eye-opener to see students, young people talking about Pan-Africanism. The task that we have, Chief Justice, is to complete our liberation in the continent. We need all of us to unite to dismantle neo-colonialism. This is the new enemy that we have, that we must defeat. And we respect that those before us gathered in Manchester spoke about imperialism. Unfortunately, we are still victims of imperialism. Some of the liberation movements betrayed the ideals of the liberation struggle. Some of them have been co-opted by the imperialist powers. So it is our duty as young revolutionaries, as this generation, to dismantle neo-colonialism and dismantle imperialism. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm Princess Wedrago, coming from Burkina Faso. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank you all and thank also my teacher, Daniel, coming from London, and just to encourage people and the young also for fighting, to continue to fighting from Pan-Africanism. I'm also a student and I know what I'm talking about. In my country, we try also to fight for Pan-Africanism. Thank you.
My brothers and sisters, my name is Youssef from Guinea-Bissau, a country in West Africa. I'm here as an anti-racist militant, and at the same time, as it should be, a Pan-Africanist militant. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today and learn and be inspired by your work. I see the flag of Haiti, of Ethiopia, and of Liberia. And I think we represent the diversity of Africa and this diaspora. And this idea of diversity should go along with the idea of unity. Because as 𝐏𝐚𝐬𝐿 Cabral, a great Pan-Africanist, used to say, we can just talk about unity when there is diversity. This is a great lesson that we should bear in mind. Diversity, unity, but at the same time, political ideology. That should be our great goal. Have this clear political ideology that if today we are fighting against imperialism, against neocolonialism, it's because nowadays those men, humans, institutions, states from abroad, they still controlling our economy. And they do it through our politicians. So it's very important to understand what is the struggle for us. It's against the imperialists, yes, but it's against nationals that work with the imperialists. So when you are talking about unity, we do unity with people that are from our same social class. Same social class. And this is very important because our struggle, it's international. We have this solidarity among us from West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, South Africa. But as we understood today here, our solidarity goes to Palestine as well, goes to Venezuela as well, goes to Cuba, and goes to all those countries that fight against imperialism as we did in the past and will continue to do it. Unity and struggle. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a great day, and I will take off from where Comrade Bashir Maina those of you who are here, I guess you remember his analysis of, of the play. But I wanted to, as what Rodney used to say, to capture the links and continuities of struggle. Try to start from where Wachira ended, and talk about principally Walter Rodney, because Walter Rodney is one of the greatest Marxists and Pan-Africanists. And I don't know how many of you have read his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Those who have read it, can you put up your hands? Okay. That book is a must, you must read it. Because it's the first history, like in my case, that demystified the history that I was studying in Kenya, completely. Because the history we were taught in schools was basically English, history. And so there were all these debates about, African history. But it's the African history paper was about the history of Europe, on Africa. It wasn't really African. And so Rodney was one of my professors in Dar es Salaam when I was reading law. And I remember that he came to the law faculty to talk about the law of contract. And we knew he wasn't a lawyer. But he gave us a brilliant trajectory of contract law, if you are teaching it. How contract law starts with serfdom, in the UK. And how, after Industrial Revolution, it's improved. There is a standard form contract that changes, and when colonialism and imperialism happens, then you get those causes you call sale of goods, right? Agency, bankruptcy, hire purchase, okay? Simply because goods are being sold in India and whoever is selling them is not bound by the principle of nemodat, which you must have read in contract law. So there are exemptions to that. And from that day on, that's how I started looking at law from historical, economic, social, spiritual, and technological context. But he also, in Dar, he ran a class called ideological class. And it happened on Sunday. And we were in a hall where the next hall was a church. So it was, very, very interesting when we had lectures on theology as well. So he wrote that classic in 1972. How Europe underdeveloped Africa. And in 2017, one of his very, very brilliant students, a professor in Tanzania called 𝐏𝐚𝐧-𝐀𝐟𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐵. Has anybody heard about 𝐏𝐚𝐧-𝐀𝐟𝐫𝐢𝐜? You have. Have you read his latest book on artificial intelligence? Yeah, that's the fifth one. 𝐾𝐬𝐬𝐜 wrote this book in 2017. It's called The Enduring Relevance of How Europe, underdeveloped Africa. And it's a great companion. If you have read Rodney, you have to read this book as well, because he deals with the critics of Rodney and what the book was about, and basically the status quo of the planet and how that should be changed. And we all know that he, before he was bombed, he had gone back to Guyana, and he formed a party called Working People's Alliance. He created that concept of working people, basically from the proletariat. He basically was arguing that the working people is a broader concept. He was a guy who was very, innovative, inventful, and like Samir Amin, he always says, if you're Marxist, you can't stop with Marx and Engels, right? You've got to go to Lenin, and Mao, okay? And even Ho Chi Minh, people who have said that that narrative has to be applied within, various contexts. So he started that, and so did 𝐾𝐴MICA Cabral, another one. Samir Amin is another African Marxist, and there are many of them. 𝐾𝐬𝐬𝐜, you have heard of Issa Shivji. If you are from Uganda, you must have heard of, Mamudani has been mentioned, but there is also Dan Nabudere in Uganda. And there are many others. Women in particular, Michelle Mugo, Nawawa al-Sadawi, in Egypt. And within Nairobi, I think they are. Don't attack me. We've already been attacked for forgetting women who have done a lot of work. But Angela Davis, because she's also, African, and many others in Africa. But I want to finish this discussion after giving you those, 2 books to read. And once you read Rodney, you also find out that he wrote a lot about the Soviet socialism, because there's a debate there. First was between the communist nations, and in 1963, the Chinese communists told the Russian communists that what they were practicing was social imperialism and not socialism. So there is a lot of debates about what was happening in Soviet Union, Stalin, the period between 1917 and 1924 is very interesting, where there were very powerful women in the Russian Revolution. Kollontai was one of them, and Anad, I think she was called, and they were very powerful in reforms that focus on women. Okay, gay rights, abortions, women being taken out of the kitchen, right? Because there were the nurseries, for children and so forth. So for about those 7 years, there is a lot of stuff that is written by women about, that particular period, of the revolution. So Rodney has written on that as well, engaged in those debates, engaged in what was happening in Amilcar Cabal's Guinea, basically to urge African Marxists not to be, dogmatic, and that they have to look at those narratives within their own, context. So the last thing I want to say is to talk briefly about the state of the planet, and Pan-Africanism. I was in one meeting where I was asked about and this was in America. So they asked me, what can you say about the African leadership in Africa at the moment? So because they were Americans, I thought I would use some words or quote Malcolm X, on that question. And I told them that African leaders are a den of house niggers. I think the African Americans got it quickly. I don't think. Have you heard that thing about Malcolm X? Yes. Okay, so that's what I told them. I don't think we can have Pan-Africanism with the kind of leaders we have, right? I don't think it's possible. We don't even have Nkrumah, we don't even have Nyerere, we don't have Amilcar Cabral, Sankara, and somebody who people rarely talk about, Gaddafi. Okay, Gaddafi, in my view, had very, very radical ideas about Pan-Africanism. A lot of people say it was this or the other. But the fact that he talked about African unity and he talked about African currency, and the reason why NATO bombed him, if you want to read that, read a book by Horace Campbell. It's called The Bombing of Tripoli. Okay, that explains why Obama, Sarkozy, was it, that time? That's the reason why Gaddafi was killed. And of course the others who are not leaders like Anta Diop, Sheikh Anta Diop and others. So in terms of Pan-Africanism, I think our analysis should be looking at Pan-African within imperialism that we've talked about, all right? And also social imperialism, because there are a lot of people who also say what we have in China is social imperialism. So it's a question of, and these debates are happening. They're happening. The other day I went to a meeting where there was a debate on BRICS, okay? And the argument was, well, there's going to be another Berlin conference. You remember the first one? 1884, 85? It's not that I was born then, but history. I know in Kenya we don't teach history, which is a mistake. But I think we can teach ourselves history, right? So the Berlin Conference is the one that divided Africa among the colonial states. The 1884, that's when they had a conference. And people are asking, is there going to be another Berlin conference, and who is going to be in it? right? Because BRICS, as the United Arab Emirates, right? Saudi is in it, right? What about Turkey? South Africa is in it. Ethiopia, Iran, Brazil, India, Russia, all those countries are in what is called BRICS. I support BRICS on one account that I think is a good struggle for a multipolar world, you know, instead of, you know, the empire, you know, which was the, you know, the US. So maybe if all African countries can join BRICS, they might have, in my view, some cracks where they can have their own initiatives in fighting for, you know, liberation. So if Berlin Conference happens, I don't know. Although I always thought that if second Berlin Conference happens, maybe Africa will unite to fight, you know, for African liberation. Reminds me of a joke I heard in Guatemala, which I always love telling. The president of Mexico called a conference. He said he wanted to address the nation, and this was live on TV. And so he told his citizens, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that all our debts have been forgiven. All foreign debts have been forgiven. Of course, people clapped. Then he told them the bad news is that we have 36 hours to leave this country because it's not ours. So that could happen, but what I thought about the joke was that they were not going to leave. Can you leave? I don't think you leave, and that's why 𝐏𝐴𝐧𝐿 was saying in Kenya, Mau Mau is coming back. Because if that happens, you stand up and fight. So what is happening on the planet? There are debates that we should please participate in, whether it's the debates between the communist parties themselves, whether it's about, you know, the African, you know, liberation, which is being debated, you know, Pambazuka News. So, but the idea is how, you know, to make sure Africa is not divided and is not recolonized, because there's a real chance that can happen, you know. Yeah, and that's, I'd promise Chepkori that I'll bring a reading list on these debates where they are, and I can give that, and then it can be circulated. There's 𝐏𝐴𝐧𝐿, I think, 𝐏𝐴𝐧𝐿 is from Mathare Social Justice Center. And whenever I give a lecture, he stands up and says, I'm giving it from a petit bourgeois position. I don't know what he's going to say today. Thank you very much.
Don't leave.
Oh, yeah, because we also
thank you so much, Professor CJ. Thank you for that lecture, short lecture, despite being a short lecture. Thank you for it. And for bringing alive the modern issues that we are grappling with as Pan-Africans. I'm hoping that we are all Pan-Africans. And we have been debating what Pan-Africanism actually means in the last 2 days. So at this moment, because we have guests here and they're in a hurry, unfortunately, they will come back to Kabarak. We're inviting them back officially. And we'll give them a school tour of our beautiful university. So I would like to introduce our guests to you, to the rest of you, our students and faculty. With us here today are 17 of us who were led by Dr. Daniel Mulugeta, Senior Lecturer in International Politics of Africa at SOAS, University of London. And he was leading a workshop on Pan-Africanism in Naivasha, focusing on grassroots movements and how Pan-Africanism is understood and manifests at the grassroots level. I know that I think 2 months ago or a month ago, he did that. He did a similar workshop on Pan-Africanism, and CJ, you were there. Issa Shivji was also there. So Dr. Daniel, please come. We have something to give you. He's also from this flag here, so I guess we should take a picture next to the flag. This is from our university press, Kabarak University Press. You are welcome to publish with us.
To publish here?
Yes.
I would love to.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, do you want me to say anything? Yeah. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Actually, we were supposed to do the reenactment of the 5th Pan-African Congress with Barney as SOAS. Unfortunately, due to timing issues, it could not go ahead. But I'm impressed with the enthusiasm with which the students has performed it. And the fact that it happened in a law school is also very promising, because lawyers are usually accused of not being revolutionary, people of procedure and so on. But I have learned myself and inspired by Willie himself about the idea of transformational jurisprudence. We discussed that before. So there is hope for us, for Africa, from lawyers. And thank you and congratulations on this amazing performance. Yeah.
Thank you also to Mr. Wachira Maina for nurturing the constitutional law class when this idea was brought to Kabarak, coaching them for this play, and offering a very insightful and empowering opening scene, setting the scene, explaining to us what this is, why this is important, because as CJ has noted, history is not taught in Kenya. And we are hoping that we will welcome you to our Law and Society class to give a lecture one of these days. With that, I would like to close this session. Yeah.